So the first thing that we're going to start with is some of the background. Now if you're putting a background in, you're always going to want to start with that. And if you try and do it afterwards, it might be harder to do. So for us, we're going to take some of our blue and get a fair amount on your paintbrush. And what we're going to do is start at the very top of whatever paper you plan on using. And we're going to go in a U shape, an upside down U. And what I like to do is I like to dab the paint on. So I'm just going to go across the top and get it on there really good. And then using the flat part of my paintbrush, we are going to just dab it on. And it's okay if it looks a little messy right now. That's not a problem. And if you're doing it in a notebook like I am, you may want to put a piece of paper up behind it so that you don't get any of your other pieces wet or painted wrong. And that's the first step that we're going to do, is just get the entire top layer about an inch down. And you could do this in smooth motions back and forth if you wanted. There's really no right or wrong with getting this first layer on. It's just going to add an element of depth to your painting. So as you can see, I've kind of gone down both sides a little bit. And I'll carry it about halfway down the page in that blue. And a lot of people think that snowy trees and scenes are a lot harder to do than you would think. But really, they're quite simple. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go in with some white. And don't clean your paintbrush, you just keep using it exactly how it is. And we're going to take that white and go right underneath the layer that you did and a little bit over top. And it's going to start mixing together. And what it's going to do is kind of create a gradient. And if you find that it's still too blue, you can always add more white. The nice thing about acrylics is that they dry really fast. So if you're finding it hard to work with them, some people do use a spritzer bottle. They fill it with some water and they spritz their acrylic painting, or they just leave a little bit extra paint on, and that'll help to give it a little bit more time before it fully dries on you. So I'm just going back into my white. My paintbrush still has blue on it, so it helps to blend in there. And I'm just following that U pattern, and we're going all the way along. And it's okay if it looks a little messy because we're not too worried about the background. This is just one extra step that you can take to really make your painting stand out. And the further down the page that I go, the more white that I add in, until it almost disappears into the back white paper. And you will see, up close, you'll see that there are some actual paintbrush marks. So you'll see the pattern of the paintbrush in it. But for me, I like that look. So as you can see in this one, I actually used my fingers for the background. I had a glove on, and I just kept dabbing until I got it to the gradient that I wanted. And you can also do this in many different colors. There's really no right or wrong with it. For this one, just because it's a snowy scene, that was the easiest way to go about it, is a nice light blue color and your white. So I'm going to take some more of that white, and we're just going to keep doing this until we get that background in. And the more time that you spend on it, the more that it will have detail in it. In this case, this one's a quick example, so it may look a little bit rougher than the silver plate, but that's okay, because this is just the concept, and whatever you want to do to the background, if you want to add clouds or if you want to add a moon, there's so many different ways to add elements to it. And especially if you're starting out, I would advise getting yourself a sketchbook or a notepad and just keep practicing. And the more that you paint and the more that you try out these different techniques, the more you'll find out what you like to do. For me, my default is kind of scenery, so I do a lot of tree paintings. And it's not that I couldn't do other paintings, I just really like trees. So, for me, that is what I like to do when I'm stuck and I can't think of anything else to paint. Or if I just want to paint and I don't really want to spend hours and hours, then I'll go to my scenery pieces. About 3/4 of the page, that's where I think I'm going to put my line in for where my tree line will start. And with that, I'm going to switch from my larger brush down to my smaller filbert little brush. And what we're going to do is we're going to go right into that blue and get as much blue paint on there as we can get. And with this part, don't be too scared if your trees look wonky or if they're not quite right. It takes a while to get used to trees, but we're actually just going to add a big tree right in the middle. And with that, you can go down in a line, and you can start with the thinner part of your paintbrush. So holding it instead of the flat way, hold it so that it is using the edge of the brush. And then from there, what I like to do is I take the flat part of the brush, lining up with that, and I pull out to the sides. And as you go down, you'll start to see a tree come out. And I just press hard and then pull gently and pull that paint out. Now there's a few different ways that you could do your trees. I like spruce trees and the trees you see in coulees. But if you're having trouble with the shape of trees, you can always too think of it like triangles. So the Christmas trees you see, as it goes down, it gets bigger. So you can always make yourself a base if you need to draw it out first or if you need to pencil it in first, and you can fill that whole area in. And then from there, pull out and add the little wisps in. So if you're having trouble with trees, try different techniques and maybe take a walk and look at the trees around outside. And maybe you want to paint a old maple tree, or there's so many different ones that you could do for a winter scene. So I'm just filling that all in with that blue right now. And with the base of the trunk, it's not going to be a flat, even line. You're going to want to curve it out on the bottoms. And it's okay if it looks a little large. And then as I go, I start to add in that bottom of our land. And I think I'm going to add one more tree in beside it. And it's going to be a little bit smaller. So same thing, starting with the edge of your brush and pulling all the way down. And as you pull down, press harder and your line will get thicker. And allowing it to curve when it gets down to the base of where the land starts. And then same idea, if you're having trouble with your trees, do little triangles. Do as many triangles as you need to get the idea of that silhouette in there. And it's okay if your trees overlap, because there usually just isn't a whole bunch of trees all by themselves. So I'm going to fill that right in, all those triangles. And then once I have, then I'll go back in and I'll add the little wispy details of the tree itself. And with this kind of a painting, it would be really nice to add in a cabin, or if you've got old signs that you want to paint, or if you've got, other ideas you want to add to it. I did actually bring another painting as well with me. That is a winter themed one. And it has a snowman in it. So I'll show you guys that one in a second here. But all I'm doing is wisping out those edges so it doesn't look like a triangle once you've got it on your paper. And just gently pulling out so that the paint spreads. And I'm really not too worried about this this layer because we're going to be adding white on top. So once you've got the trees in that you want, I'm also going to finish that land a bit. And if you're like me and you like coulis, what I like to do is actually just wisp it out and almost pretend like you're making a cloud or something that kind of looks like it's just floating in the air. And I'm going to paint it right off the page actually. So it's going to end about there for me. But that'll be the start of where our coulis is. So if you want to add that in, you can. And if you don't, you don't have to. You can make hills or you can make a little tree falling in front, whatever you'd like to do. But here is an example of another winter scene that I've done. And you can see in this one, I added snowflakes and a snowman, and I added a little bit of a river that's been frozen over. There's a lot of different things that you can do once you get used to painting with acrylics. So I would say even if you're not happy with your painting, just keep playing with it. Even if you're not happy right now with how it looks, that's okay. Because as you go on, you can always add and paint over top with acrylics. They dry very fast, and that's a nice part about them. So now that you've got that base on, I'll do an up close for you to see. Looks pretty rough right now, but that is your general silhouette and idea. And I didn't paint any grass in because the grass will have died during the winter. And right now, we're going to add snow to the actual trees. And you can pick one side or the other, but generally, if the sun is on this side, we'll see more of the snow and shadowing on this side. And the left side of it will have the darker side. So then what I do is I take my white, and starting at the top, I just use the tip of my brush and I start to pull down. And I go right over top of that blue, but I don't cover it all. I leave little gaps in it to give the idea that there's different layers to the tree. And if you've added too much white in, that's okay. You can always go back after and add more blue on top. So I've just covered half of my tree right now. And that's what it looks like at the moment. I'm going to go back in with my blue, and I'm going to do just a little bit on top. And just a little on the other side, but not all the way. But just enough to know that there's snow over the entire tree. So there's an up close again. Now I'm going to take my blue, full blue, so wash your paintbrush if you need to, and I'm going to go over that white. And that's going to create lots of layers and more depth to your painting. So you could spend a lot of time on this and really get it detailed, or you can just keep playing with it until you feel like you're good with it. So again, with the side of my brush and just gentle strokes, and just add some blue in again on top of that white. And it'll kind of be a little bit lighter blue because it's mixing in with that white. And then on the other tree, we're going to do the same. And I did this tree first because this tree I think is going to be in front. So you'll want the snow to show up in front of this other tree. And that'll give it a little bit more depth. So again, starting at the top and just adding in some little flicks of white paint. And in this case, I'm going right over the blue because now we are covering a little bit of that other tree. And my white is mixing with the blue because it wasn't quite dry, so that actually works really good. So taking a little bit more blue and just adding a couple more streaks in. There is no right or wrong with it, so keep playing with it and keep on practicing. And if anybody makes a creation and they follow along to this, make sure to share it because I'd love to see what you make. And I really encourage everyone to try out and do their own things and go their own directions with their painting. And you can follow step by step and make the exact same painting, or if you want, you can make your own completely different one. So regardless of what you come up with, I'd love to see what it looks like. So the next step that we're going to do is painting the side of the trunk white and some of that bottom snow, just to give it an idea of the winter scene that we're looking for. So I'm only going to touch right on the right side of the trunks. Oops, and I added a little bit too much white in, so I'm going to go back with some blue and just cover that up a little bit. And once you've got your tree trunks painted, then you can go in and you can add snow where you'd like. And because the light is hitting on this side, we're going to want the snow to again follow that same pattern. And I'm just gently brushing a little bit of white on top of that blue that we've got there. And my paintbrush barely has any paint on it, so when you're doing that, you'll start to see some of the brush strokes come out. So once you've got your shadowing in and some of your snow, that's when we can do the bottom of the cliffs if you want. And in this case, I'm going to take some white with a little bit of blue mixed together, almost making like a light blue. And we're going to start at where the edge of your cliff is. And we're just going to touch the paintbrush to the page and we're going to pull down. And we're just going to do that all the way along. And if you need to paint a line first, just underneath of where your cliff starts, make sure to do that. That'll help you to not paint over what you've just done. And we're just going to pull right down. And we're not too worried about what it looks like. You can add more white in, add more blue if you want them to be darker. And we're going to pull all the way down. This is kind of an easy way to cheat and make fancy looking cliffs without really knowing how to do it. And the longer that you spend looking at scenery outside, or if you happen to take a trip to Drumheller or out to Denelda where there's a nice coulee, you'll start to see what cliffs look like. For me, I always end up adding coulees into my paintings. I just like the looks of them, and there's so many around Alberta. So same thing here, drawing a little bit of a line in first, and once you've done that, you can pull that paint right down. And it's okay if you accidentally paint over part of your cliff. You can always go back in and paint it again with the blue color. That's a really nice part about acrylics. And if you don't have acrylics, you can try this in watercolor, oil painting. Oil painting's a little bit more finicky, but that's okay. The more that you play with different mediums, the more that you'll find what you really like. So the last thing that I'm going to do is just add in a few streaks of the blue into my coulees. And I kind of wisp them. Sometimes I make like a little S shape, or I pull down and just let it disappear. And I just add it here and there, wherever you think that there might be a shadow, but more or less making like little streaks. And you could use a liner brush and get really detailed in there, but for me, I never really worry about it because the overall look you won't even notice. That's the one nice thing about painting, is paintings usually aren't looked at up close. So you'll see a lot of famous artists and different things that they have a huge painting and you think it's really detailed, and then you get up closer and it's a lot of paint splotches that make up from a distance a 3D dimensional look like this. And it's not until you get closer that you see their brush strokes and some of the little pieces that they do shortcuts to make their creations. So there's just a quick idea of how to do a winter scene. Now you could go in and you could add in your snowflakes, or if you have a moon or anything like that that you'd like to, just keep playing with it and add as you go and start to figure out what medium you like. But that is just a quick look at how I make my snowy trees. Now I've done this on saws and different canvases and all kinds of things. So you could paint on just about anything that you want. And even with this one, you could keep on adding, and you could have a whole snowman right beside. And I'd like to thank you guys for tuning in today and for following along. And for anyone who is new to this, I'm usually on Mondays and at 1:30. I'll also be doing a segment on Wednesday. And this one, I won't be doing a painting or a drawing with you guys. I'll actually be doing a little bit of a walkthrough and talk a little bit about how SASART came into creation and how I got started in art and why I've continued it until now. So I'd like to thank Raritan Services for sponsoring this segment of StettlerLocal.com/TV. I've loved doing the program so far, and I like doing these segments. They're quick and easy. You can use materials you find around your house. Doesn't have to be anything fancy, doesn't have to be expensive. You can use really good brushes or cheap brushes. There's no right or wrong. The whole idea is about creating a piece and just learning and taking some time. It can be relaxing to watch, to follow along to. There's so many different things about art. So for me, I love all aspects of it, and I definitely enjoy showing people and sharing with them how I create what I make. So my name is Savannah, and I go by SASART. So if anybody wants to check me out on Facebook or Instagram, I have a TikTok. And you can also look at the local Sobeys here in Stettler, and you'll see some of my window paintings. I dabble in all kinds of mediums, and I am a self-taught freehand artist. So I do pretty much anything and everything that is art related. So thanks, and hope you guys enjoyed.